We are live. I am live. Everybody like the stream, or if you're watching the playback like that. I am doing something new tonight. This is not my usual schedule. I usually stream on Wednesdays, but I've decided that I need to stream more often, and I have editing that I need to get done. And the only time I can do both of those things is late at night. So who needs to sleep? This will be interesting. This will be my first edit stream. Should be fun. I'm not going to be writing on stream. I think that's a little weird. I have to be really focused when I do that. And I'm usually writing while I'm walking. So not really something I can live stream easily. I don't know. Maybe one day. But editing, I think, is a lot easier. And then if anybody happens to drive by the live stream and asks a question, I can actually stop and answer it in the middle of editing. Editing will also be more interesting because I won't be creating something new. There will actually be something there, and you can kind of read along, and you'll actually get sort of a sneak peek at some stuff that's going to be releasing, the stuff I'm working on. So I think this will be fun. And besides, for my brain, it really works to kill two birds with one stone. Right? So I had a goal of getting my steps in because I'm fat. And so I started going on walks. I also wanted to start writing more. And I had the brilliant idea, well, I could write on my phone while I'm walking. And once I started doing that, I was far more consistent in my walking and getting my steps in. And I was far more consistent getting my words into. It just kind of took off. And it's been the most consistent I've been with writing and even exercise in my life. So it's really good. Really, really good. I would say it's like goal stacking. I basically put two things together that I want to accomplish, and doing that means that I actually am really motivated to accomplish them. So I also have the goal of editing the actual stuff I'm writing, which I'm a little behind on right now, honestly. So I have this goal of editing the stuff that I'm writing. And I also want to do the social media thing a little bit and get myself out there and, make myself a little more discoverable to people and that sort of thing. And so it's really like, again, killing two birds with one stone. I'm going to edit here on stream. Not every stream is going to be like this. I like how the Wednesday stream is still kind of like some other fun stuff, but then I'll stream, I don't know. If my wife is watching, I won't stream that often, honey. I promise. I'm going to try to. I need to edit a lot, so I probably will do short streams every night. See how it goes. Not super short, like maybe an hour at the least, and then see how it goes. So that's the plan, anyway. And we're going to discover it as we go along. We're going to discover it as we go along. This will be new for everybody. New for everyone. So screen sharing. This is going to be interesting because I use a program called Scrivener to actually do my writing in, and I'm going to share that, and it's going to be wonky for a second because that means I have to share my whole screen. I think I'll go with this layout. Is that going to work? I think that's the only one that can work. Honestly, I don't think I can do it any other way. I don't know, unless there's... Ooh, did I screw it up? I don't know that I did. Let me add something here. let's I want to see how that works. I don't know. That should be fine. I move that over. Okay. Just getting things set up, folks. Yeah, I think that should work. We're going to try that. I think that's a little bigger. Okay. We're going to experiment here for a second. This is going to be kind of trippy. Forgive me. Versus this, I'm a little bigger. And full screen share. Let's see how this looks. There we go. Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. You're looking at one of my characters right now. Figured this would be a good image to start the editing on. This would get a lot of attention. Okay. Welcome to my world. Here we have everything to do with my writing all in this one place. There's a lot of stuff here that is not going to make any sense to everybody, and that's totally fine. But this is how I organize everything. So here is my current draft that I am working on. This is some stuff that I just, I just wrote this today. Some of these chapters in here. And for those who aren't familiar with Scrivener, if you're not a writer, obviously, you're probably going to have no idea what this is, but basically allows me to, I could write in here. I actually do write in Scrivener. I typically do so on my phone. They have a mobile version of the app as well. And then there's some editing tools and things like that, some other things. This fancy guy right here is my draft target. That's for my current draft, my current work in progress, which is Jotnar is the working title. It's going to have a better title, a more complete title, I should say, soon. But you can see my goal for this one was about 15,000 words, and I overshot that by a little bit. It has a little ways to go still. It might wind up around 20,000 words. Well, 19,000 words, excuse me. Just like a tad left. I don't know. We'll see. And then this is my writing for the week so far. 10,000 out of 15,000 words, which is kind of an outdated goal for me now. I'm writing more than I have been in the past. So that 10K is just in the last 2 days, yesterday and today, which is quite an increase in pace for me. And without a whole lot of extra time. So it's worked out well. But what we're going to be doing today, actually, is we're going to be starting by outlining one of my books. This is the next episode in the Scions of Oth series. And it has nothing in it. Are these blank? These are all good. These are all goody. These are all blank, right? So there's this fun little mode that Scrivener does where you can treat these like note cards and just add stuff to them. And so I use probably one of the simplest methods here of storytelling, which is the can't remember what this method is called, but it has a name. But and these are pretty common terms in storytelling too. So this might be something that you're familiar with. So you have the inciting incident. You have the inciting incident, which is an initial event, usually like throwing you right into the action in many cases, or immediately immersing you in the world. So it's kind of that real sudden sweeping you away into that immersive experience is the inciting incident. Kind of like you're walking into the middle of something while it's in the middle of happening. It's useful for generating interest. Starting off a story with exposition is always a little rough and usually doesn't hold a reader's interest. So if you start in the middle of some sort of action sequence, whatever that looks like for your genre, that usually winds up working better. The first plot point, this is the turning point of a story. If this event did not take place, then the rest of the book wouldn't happen, pretty much. Usually it is if you're talking about like the first book in a series, should be a very, very pivotal moment for the main character. In subsequent installments in a series, this it's it's tricky because you can't make this too big, because your main character can only go on so many adventures, right, that are life altering and life changing. So for example, if we use Lord of the Rings here, let's use the movie, not the book. Let's use the movie. All right. So the inciting incident, really, in the Lord of the Rings movies, in the Fellowship of the Ring specifically, is actually that whole narrated portion at the beginning. Because it's a movie, they can get away with it and just showing you what is going on. But essentially, the inciting incident in the theatrical release of Fellowship of the Ring is the fight with Sauron and Isildur's failure to destroy the ring. That is essentially the inciting incident, right? The first plot point is Frodo receiving the ring. Really? You could argue maybe it's his decision to, you could make an argument that it's his decision to take the ring to Mordor, but really that happens too late. That happens too late in the story. And so the first plot point would be him receiving the ring. If he never received the ring, nothing would have happened the way it happened. The twist, usually at the midpoint, there's some sort of twist, something changes. The character learns something that they didn't know before, so something new happens, or some information is revealed. The second plot point is leading up to the main confrontation. And this is another step along the way. This isn't as prominent necessarily as the first plot point, but it is important because it is what ultimately leads to the confrontation. It is that essentially without this step, there would be no confrontation, is the way to think of it. Sometimes this is another reveal of information, or the character is put into that fight mode or fight or flight mode, whatever it happens to be. Right. And then you have the confrontation, which is the, whatever the big action piece of the story is. And then you have the resolution. And not every story has to follow this sort of path, but I like to use these points. The confrontation is sometimes, and the resolution are sometimes the easiest place to start. And so this book, this is Automaton Hoax. This is episode 12. And so I've just recently wrapped up episode 11. And where we left our characters off, that would be under editing here. This is just finished. So episode 11. And I have all of the chapters categorized by the character. So you'll see I have a few characters. There's actually a number of point of view characters at this point in time. There's going to be fewer in book 12. This is starting season 2 of the series. And so there's a bit more information at the beginning that I have to get out, and so that means multiple characters sometimes. And so we have Kaz. She is one of my favorite characters, and she is at the end of book 11. She is basically has been captured for the second time in a row. She keeps getting herself into trouble. And she is with a buddy of hers, Tathis. Caden, this is actually Kaz's son. He is in an interesting position. He is on a station in space with a whole bunch of angry robots. Is the way to put it. But he has just met with Ebenar, who is supposedly his half-brother. He's actually not his half-brother. They're not even related by blood. But Ebenar is he's having quite a moment. And Nenagar, he is the villain at this point. He did more in book 10 than he did in book 11. And I need to give him something nasty to do, honestly. I want him to be pretty hated in this series. That's my goal for him, is to have everybody hate him, which means he has to stick around longer than he's welcome. This would be, similar to think of Joffrey from Game of Thrones. He outstayed his welcome, right? He definitely did. Gerald, this is he's really the main character. He's taking a bit of a back seat to the main plot now because he's having some interesting experiences right now. Let me see if I can move this a little bit. Maybe this will help. I'm trying to see because I'm watching the stream on another window. That's a little better. Let me do that. I know I'm looking back and forth. Is that better? Is that better? This is all just words on a page. If I move it again, will that work? I'm watching it. I'm waiting for myself to move it. This is so entertaining. Okay. Right there, and then I'm going to shrink this. I can't shrink that anymore. Oh, that works. That's okay. Okay. But I have kind of an idea of what's going to happen with him. And then Gretchen and Abby, this is actually a mother and daughter, and their plots kind of follow closely with one another. So here, Gerald, Kaz, and Caden really have their own plots. Kaz and Nenengar's plots kind of weave together a little bit, so they complement each other. So I really only have about 4 plot lines going at this point, which is really the most that I want to do. There are some episodes where more plot lines can be included if there's a lot of dynamics going on. But really, I have this main plot line here with Gretchen and Abby, and then I have Gerald's plot line, Kaz and Nenengar, which are they're flowing with each other, and then Caden's plot line. So he's doing his own thing. We really need to follow up with Caden. We need to know where he is. We need to know where Gerald is and what he's doing. Abby is probably going to wind up taking a bit of a back seat in book 12 because she's at a good spot, a resting spot, and Gretchen, her daughter, is actually a newer character and needs to have her 15 minutes, right? So Abby is going to be dropped as a point of view character for book 12. She's not going to be gone as a character completely, but she will not be a point of view character in book 12, which is actually the first time she's not going to be a point of view character in any of the books, which is interesting. But it's time for her to have a little break, That's fine. Also, because I think it's better to have her character right now develop off screen. And so I'll give her the chance to mature, not mature. She's, what am I talking about? She's almost 50. So, so, maybe if she were a bottle of wine, that would be considered maturing, but no, she's going to develop her character off screen for now. And that I think will be fine. So if we come back up here, what do I have for characters? Yeah, I've got, these are all just placeholders, I think. Right? Aren't they? And so we'll come back to this. And so we're going to look at Gerald first. So Gerald, we're probably going to have 4 or 5 chapters worth. There's a bit going on with him. We need to pick up where we left off because at the end of book 11, he is on the bridge of a ship and a portal just opened up on the bridge. And somebody's about to step through it. So we need to reveal that. That really is a great inciting incident here for the whole book, but specifically for Gerald's plotline. When I have multiple plot lines, sometimes there are multiple inciting incidents to kind of kick off that plot line and draw some interest into it. So I sometimes have multiple inciting incidents or multiple first plot points, usually only one twist though. So we're going to go with so it's this, what's this? I don't know. I don't have a name for this guy, do I? This happens to me a lot, as you can probably tell. A character with no name. So the Laneth, that's the faction he belongs to, comes through the portal. Did I want to do it that way? Just have him come right through the portal like that? Or do I want to do like a time skip? Because I could do that. I don't know what he's going to come through the portal and see him, and that's going to be it. What's that going to do? What's that going to really accomplish? I don't know. Whereas if we skip ahead, they could be in the middle of a conversation. Well, we'll just say, yeah, I think it's better that it's after the fact. Or it's short. It's a short scene. Yeah. Laneth guy walks through the portal onto the bridge of the Ardent. That's the name of the ship. So we'll go with that. The twist. So, automaton hoax. This episode, for those who don't know what an automaton hoax is a reference to, there is in chess, there was a long time ago, not that long ago really, but a while ago, some dude built this mechanism, this thing that he claimed could play chess on its own, and so you could play against the automaton chess player, and it was this like contraption that they wheeled around, and it was kind of this spectacle. So they took it around all over the place, and it was most definitely a hoax. There was no way at that point in time. We're talking, gosh, we're talking 200 years ago or older, farther back than that even. And so a considerable amount of time in the past when that wouldn't have really been feasible. And so the automaton nature of it was that you could play chess against this robot, right? Essentially is what it was for that day and age. They didn't have that word back then, I don't think, but it won, generally speaking. It was pretty reliable, but it was a hoax. It was most definitely a hoax. that's kind of what's going on in this book as well. So for the reveal here, the twist is that's essentially the twist, right? The space station that Caden is on, with a whole bunch of angry robots, it's kind of been assumed that that space station is just kind of running itself, and then the humans living on it there and are working on it on a day-to-day basis are just, hanging out, having a good time while the station sort of runs itself. But they're going to find out that that is in fact not the case. There is actually some entity behind the scenes pulling the strings, and has been this whole freaking time, which is like 10,000 years, because this space station is essentially an ancient ark ship that humanity traveled on a long, long time ago. So, Caden, we're going to have him be the one who receives the revelation. The twist is going to happen for him. The reader is going to experience it through his character, rather. And so, this is going to be the reveal that Asylum, that's the name of the station, is not, in fact, automated or self-sustaining. The Wizard of Oz esque reveal that is what's going to go on here. There's someone behind the scenes pulling the strings, and that person, well, it's essentially the character of Ebenar, who's another main character, or it's whoever is in his body. And so I have to bring myself to a decision here as to whether or not this is supposed to be an old villain. There was an old villain that I thought of resurrecting. I think they would maybe suspect him first because he was an artificial being and he could take over a computer system. He could plug his consciousness into other things. So that would be their first assumption, but that would be wrong. So they suspect Zebulon, but it is in fact let's maybe say it's hard to name it because I don't know that I want it to be a person necessarily, but it's more that the station itself. There has to be someone behind it. I'm going to have to return to this. Because I know what I want to do here, generally speaking, but it needs to materialize a little bit more. So the main confrontation, there's also a war going on. So for Gretchen, this would be a major battle against the White Star Fleet. That is their enemy. For Caden, I think this needs to be it's tough. He's got to get the heck off of Asylum. I don't think he can stay there. I think he's got to leave. So this would be a confrontation with Ebenar's forces and escape from Asylum with Malor. That's one of his pals. Priya And let's say, yeah, we'll leave it at that. I don't know if those other characters need to tag along or not. For Nenengar, this confrontation is going to be with director Jada. Dada. Thank you, spell check. Why does spell check never? I get it, man. I get it. Sometimes though, spell check is just a pain in the butt, especially as a writer when you have a lot of made up words that you're using. It's like, why? Why do you need to give me a hard time? I suppose the truth is here is I just need to tell it to learn that word. I did this on an older computer once, and then I got a new one, and it didn't know all these words. That's an actual name, so I don't know why it doesn't know that one. But there we go. Director Jada of the White Stars. That is going to result in a schism in their alliance, because they are currently buddies, but they will no longer be at the end of this episode. That also probably brings about the point. There's some revelations here too that these are smaller twists, but still changes that would be important for Caden. Oh, we already did Caden. Who am I kidding? For Nenengar, this is probably that director Jada has either disobeyed or betrayed him. Nenengar is an emperor, so he's kind of a pain in the ass, right? Yep. And then the resolutions, obviously, we want to figure out where the characters are going to land. So we want to do this for each character because we want to know what's going to happen with them at the end. And sometimes I will come back and fill all this in. Is that going to be enough? And then we've got Gretchen. And really, again, Kaz and Nenengar, these two are going to be the same. Caden's got his own storyline, Gerald and Gretchen. Yeah, that's still the most I would want to do. I'll have a little more room to work with, though, I think. And so did I have a high? Where is that? Season 2. What did I have on here? Method is, oh yeah, reactivating the relic. Okay. So that actually sounds like a good bit of. Oh, that's right. Now I remember. Gerald. So I think they need to discover. Really, that there's more than one relic. Although he might learn this sooner than the midpoint, but still. So the resolution really is that there is a way for Gerald to make it back home. And rejoin the rest of the fleet. He's currently separated from everybody. So he finds that there is actually a way. Man. Caden, for him, I think it's going to be getting the hell off of Asylum. And he needs to where is he going to land? And so I think the first most obvious place is in the hands of Gretchen. I think that's where he belongs. Not romantically. Let me make that clear. He has another romantic interest, and so does she. They are not each other's romantic interests. In fact, they're more like cousins. And so, and in the hands of Gretchen and the Dauntless, the name of one of the ships. Kaz will come back to Nenengar, betrayed by Jada. He finally gets off his ass and starts to wage war with his own fleet, taking on the White Stars and attempting an alliance with Ebenar. Gretchen. Now, they kind of had a major victory. Well, they had a bit of a setback. It was a half and half. It was a half and a half last time. So I think a victory might be in order here for Gretchen. That would be a good arc for her character. I think coming out on top. She overcomes her injuries from book 11 and gets back in the cockpit, leading her leading to a pivotal victory against the White Stars. Also, Caden shows up. Cool. And then there's Kaz. Now, Kaz, it's going to be interesting because she is going to be primarily used as a vessel to reveal Director Jada and everything that's going on with her in this episode. So the resolution for her has to be kind of unique. And honestly, I might hold off on writing her storyline. So what I do when I am writing is you'll see all these characters here, right? What I actually did was I wrote Gerald. I wrote all 4 of his chapters first. I wrote that storyline first. Then I wrote Caden's storyline, his 3 chapters. I wrote them in a row. And then Kaz and Nenengar I bounced back and forth on because their storyline tracks with each other. And same thing with Gretchen and Abby because their storylines tracked with each other. They were essentially following the same plot. And so I do it that way so that it's cohesive. So you're reading a chapter with this character. And by the way, this is not necessarily the final order of these chapters. These are going to get rearranged at some point. But you're reading that character's chapter, and it's flowing in a way that makes sense from chapter to chapter. In the past, when I've done that in order, it winds up getting a little bit more messy, in all honesty. So I try to avoid that now, and unless I absolutely have to. So the resolution is really the most important part, knowing where the characters are going to end up, because if I know where they're going to end up, then I can find the pieces along the way, right? I think the inciting incident here for Gretchen, she is now the CAG on board the Dauntless, but still not 100% after her injuries. Has a how do I want to has a fight with one of her pilots and jumps in the cockpit to prove that she can still hack it and fails miserably. So she has this, she was shot in the leg, and being a fighter pilot, you might not think that you have to use your legs, but you do. Now, granted, this is in space, but still, G-forces are a thing, right? And you wouldn't, you really have to hold yourself steady. And it's one of those things where you would probably underestimate that until you're in that situation. So that's the inciting incident there. For Gretchen, that's a good one. This is my typical plotting as well, by the way. So it's all pretty. This is all pretty standard. So I think what we'll do is we'll start to get some of these chapters in place. So I have this plot here, and so in Scrivener we just add a document. And so we have Gretchen, and I have labels for all these characters. A lot of those characters are from different stories, by the way. And then we will just duplicate. I think she's probably going to get about 4 chapters. And I always love how it does this. I'm a little persnickety, a little OCD. A little no OCD never hurt anybody, right? No. I know some people who suffer with OCD. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's really stressful, because usually when you suffer from OCD, you don't want to suffer from OCD. Right? You don't want to have those obsessive behaviors. But you do. And duplicate. Sweet. So there we go. So those are Gerald's chapters. He's orange I don't know why he's orange. I don't know why I picked orange originally for him. Then Caden, there's gonna be some stuff going on with him. He's gonna need about 4 chapters. I realize I'm doing this totally inefficiently, because I'm like deleting these numbers and then dragging this one down here. I never said I was smart, folks. Never said I was smart. Oh, I didn't change the icons on those yet. This is the way I do it. Oh, this is just me. Okay. And we have Nenengar. And I think try to go with 3 chapters, because he's still going to be kind of parallel to Kaz. And Wait, here, I'll change the icon first. And the label. And then I duplicate. And duplicate. Not what I meant. There. Is that about right? That's 12, 18 chapters. I shoot for about 40 plus thousand words, about 40 to 45. So short novels. Some people technically consider like 40,000 words to be a novella, but for most of my stuff, it's short novels, 40 to 45,000 words, which is a length that I think works perfectly for my writing style. A little more fast paced. Oh, what am I doing? Well, this is actually a good thing. Let me see here. So what are we looking at? This was about 47,000 words. And that chapter is not even a real chapter. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Right? Mm-hmm. It's close. I think we will add some spare chapters here just so that I'm thinking about it. There might be some characters who need to get an extra chapter or two. I just don't know who yet. I just don't know who that would be yet. And so really what I would do is I would come in here now and I would look at these as note cards. And so I can see, right, here's Gretchen and what are her chapters going to be, and Gerald, what's going to happen with him. And typically what I would do is I would pick a character that I'm really jiving with and resonating with, and probably write their chapters first and dive into that first before I do anything else. So again, here we have our major plot points. That works perfectly. So I have all this in one place. So who do I have the most for? Is it Gretchen, I think, at this point? I think her story is pretty clear to me. So we want to introduce Gretchen as the CAG, running probably some flight drills or something on the flight deck, as it were. One of the cadets. No, are they cadets? I mean, whatever. One of the pilots gives her a hard time about her leg, teases her, something like that. Gretchen. There we go. Gretchen decides to hop in a fighter and show them herself. I think this would be not flight drills on the flight deck, but these would be like I think some actual, like, not live fire, but like actual drills. So they're actually getting into the cockpit and they're out there, and then she could already be in the fighter. She could already be out there. Like, she could get in the cockpit, fly the thing out there and not do anything crazy, right? Because of her injury. I don't know if she was cleared to fly or not. That's the question. Maybe she should stay on the flight deck, because I'm getting into the fighter is actually a pivotal moment for her. Don't want to take that away. So running drills. We'll say live drills, whatever. However, one of the pilots gives her a hard time about her leg. She decides to hop in a fighter and show them herself. It goes badly. So this is, clearly this is like not good stuff. And she has to get towed back to the docking bay. And then the ship, I guess we'll say the chapter ends with an announcement over the comm. Dauntless is not under attack. I don't want them to be under attack, but there's going to be they're going to get into the action right away. Right. Is about to jump into the fray. Something like that. So we have 4 chapters to work with here. So I think what we need is to have we want to step up the action here a little bit, right? This would be a good point for the first plot point for Gretchen, right? So she's grounded, right? And while her pilots are in a dogfight with the White Stars. So she's obviously a little frustrated by this, having to stay back and not be a part, excuse me, folks, and not be a part of the action. So dealing with frustrations, not being part of the action, coordinating her pilots from the ship, from the flight deck. And here we'll say, the tide of the battle turns against them, and they are down a critical number of fighters. Gretchen chooses to get in the cockpit again, this time to save her pilots, right? And we end with that. So here in her first chapter, obviously she's kind of a laughing stock. The other pilots think she's not all that great. And in fact, she kind of gets embarrassed. And she has to kind of overcome that here now to step in and rescue them. So then the third chapter would really encapsulate probably the confrontation, the primary confrontation here. So this is basically just going to be a straight up space battle sequence here. One thing that I've been wanting to do is do more boarding sequences in these space battles. There's in the beginning of Scions of Oth, in the first season, there was more of well, there were two types of space battles going on. There was the ship to ship stuff that would you typically see from the bridge. The captain was ordering everybody around and things were happening in a dynamic way there. But then you got to see the point of view from some of the fighter pilots there for a little bit. However, that didn't uh, last very long. And that's because one of the main characters who was a fighter pilot died. And so I realized that was something missing and I wanted to bring it back. I do actually have plans to write an entire series that's based around the fighter pilots in the Saron Space Corps because I think that would be really interesting. And it's a type of thing that I like to write. And for whatever reason, I got away from it. It was intended to be kind of initially it was intended to be a key part of it, but then other stuff took over. So I can't go back and change it, but I can add it in there now. So we have this. It's a straight up battle sequence. We'll have Gretchen. So if you think of like the inspiration for these boarding sequences, which there is one in the in episode 1, Bad Bishop, was Star Wars Battlefront, if I'm not mistaken. A game I haven't played in years. And not even like the newer version of it, like the old one. And you would have these ship-to-ship battles, and you would board the enemy ship and then mess with them, right? Is one thing you would do. So some type of ship-to-ship boarding or something like that could be that could be interesting, and that way you mix up the action, right? So Gretchen manages with her injuries, picking off several enemy fighters. And then let's have her. She leads a few fighters on a boarding excursion. Boarding the. I don't mind using the same word over and over again if it's in the outline. Boarding the enemy ship and dropping its shields. Or should we drop the shields? These are the big decisions that writers have to make, guys. It might seem super easy. Like, it's just so obvious. But if they drop their shields, what's that really going to do, right? They're on the enemy ship. So what is the ship? Is their ship just going to shoot it down? No, that doesn't make sense. They would need to take down their weapon systems, dropping its weapon systems, and bada bing, bada boom. Would probably be the best thing to do. Drop its weapon systems, and maybe they claim the ship for themselves rather than sabotage it. That'd be pretty cool. Either that, or I think what would also be cool is some crazy self-destruct sequence. A self-destruct sequence is always fun in sci-fi. You could always count on it. Obviously, like Alien and Aliens had that. That was a trope that they used. Metroid used that a lot in like the opening sequences of Metroid, and it was great. It's just like that's an inciting incident, really, right? You've just lost all of your power-ups, and now you have to escape from this ship that's about to blow up. I like sequences like that. So the White Stars in this story are essentially a group of separatist terrorists. So they are not, above, destroying a ship. And maybe this ship, because they had captured some of the other Saron ships earlier on in the previous story. So maybe this is simply the them maybe this is actually one of those ships. And so instead of letting it fall into the hands of the Saron again, they're gonna hop in an escape pod and blow the thing up. And so yeah, that sounds good. A little, I will admit, that sounds a little, maybe just slightly over the top, right? And so it will depend. I might pivot away from this when I get to that point of the story. Maybe it's not necessary, but I think a self-destruct sequence initiating that makes sense for that group. It's if it's a ship that they commandeered, it's not their ship in the first place, and maybe they're kind of put in this desperate position, and maybe they've even been ordered not to let the ship fall into enemy hands under any circumstances. It makes sense. Now, what is the escape sequence going to look like? I don't think that can be too ridiculous. I don't think that's going to be totally insanely involved, but it sounds fun to me. Gretchen et al. Focus or attempt to reclaim the ship. This is probably going to be the Indomitable then, because that is one of the ships that was taken previously by the White Stars. Attempt to reclaim the ship, but the captain initiates the self-destruct sequence, forcing them to retreat. And then this is where Gretchen might actually need a 5th chapter. Because that's a lot to happen there in a short amount of time, and I don't want to compress that too much. So Gretchen et al. Escape from the Indomitable as it blows. Everyone is okay for the most part. White Star captain escapes along with most of their fighters as they jump away. And then we will have Gretchen. What do we want Gretchen to do? This would be a good time for Caden to show up. In the aftermath, Caden shows up out of nowhere. It's kind of a good random thing to happen at the end. Okay. So we've got those 4 chapters plotted. So I've got something to start with here. That's pretty good. And then I think next I will probably move on to Caden. So if let me organize these here. And I'll probably move on to Caden next. I'll ruminate on that a little bit. And then Gerald, it makes sense. He's going to be his own storyline, really. So I could write his storyline at any time, because it's going to be independent of every other character for a little while as I bring him back from the dead, essentially. Not literally, but essentially. So there we go. We've got that plotting done. I think we're going to pause on the plotting for now and move on to some actual editing. So I need to do a consistency edit on that, but actually what I need to do, what I should be doing, is a little bit of touch up. So I am going to kind of be re-releasing Bad Bishop as part of a boxed set for season 1, and I'm giving it a little bit of a polish, a little bit of a once over. And primarily that's going to be with Gerald's character. His character needs some adjustment. So I want to put a little bit of a spit shine on this here. So this is we're all the way back to book 1, right? That's where we are. It's not technically a rewrite in the strict sense. I'm not actually rewriting this, but that's like my final edits. And I've written this stuff a long time ago. I'm coming back, I'm tweaking some things. So what I did was I did sort of a soft release of season 1. I had it all ready to go, and I released that book. Really, I released it. I could have done a better job with it. I released it all at once. And so book 1, the one thing is that I didn't have a lot of feedback yet from readers. And I got some feedback after doing that soft launch. That was sort of like my beta reader test. Let me just put it out there and see what people say, see what people think. And I'm fine with that. That was intentional. Maybe not the traditional way that an author will do this sort of thing. Like some authors are really, they have beta readers and whatnot. That's hard to get those folks interested in doing that. I have a few who did a beta read for First Board, and it went really well, and hopefully they'll stick around for some future releases that I have. I actually am going to be sending them my current work in progress once it's done. So hopefully they stick around. The problem is you have to get everybody, you have to get all those beta readers through all of the episodes you've written. So I'm writing 12 now. I'm on book 12, and there are some beta readers or some people who might want to be beta readers, but they haven't read the series yet. So I have to get them up to speed. Okay. Yeah, I fixed that. Are we done with this chapter? Yes. This chapter is complete. So you'll see here, this text, this is what I do when I'm writing in Scrivener, and it's really kind of fun, is I can change the revision mode and change the color of the text. So this white text here, this is actually, it would be black if I weren't in dark mode. But this is the regular text. This is what was already there before. And then the green, everything you see in green is what I've added since then or changed. And I can also look back and see snapshots here of previous stuff going back for a ways, and some comments and things like that. So I have lots of little tweaks that I made. Nothing too crazy, as you can see, because I'm not really, like I said, I'm not really rewriting all of this. I'm just giving it a once over and adding some fine tuning, some light touches to certain things. So this character here. Oh, okay. So this chapter here, I think, already got a rewrite. Yep. This one did get a pretty good rewrite, if I'm not mistaken. And let's just listen to it. So what I do here when I edit is I play the audio so it can speak to me. So we'll do that, and that's the best way for me to get my head into it.
Come on, Syl, you got one more in you. Scylla pushed the barbell up from her chest. Straining, she kept her back arched, pushing through the ground with her feet to brace. She barely eked out the final rep, shaking as her arms extended. John grabbed the bar, helped her rack it. There ya go. 2 more sets like that and we can call it a workout. Scylla took a breath before sitting up from the bench. She wiped the sweat off her brow. 2 more. John went about adjusting the weights on either end of the barbell. Well, 2 more sets here. After this there's incline. The lights around the perimeter of the room turned red. An announcement came from Commander Growl over the comm. Attention. Condition 1 throughout the ship. All crew report to your stations. Repeat. Condition 1 throughout the ship. The weight room became a beehive, with crew members quickly abandoning what they were doing and grabbing their things to leave. Scylla turned to look at John.
I would say, let's abandoning they're in a gym, their workouts. That's better.
Scylla turned to look at John, but he was staring down at his wireless with intensity. What is it? He tucked his wireless back into his pocket. We need to get to the flight.
We'll just say he tucked it. We already mentioned what it was.
He tucked it back into his pocket. We need to get to the flight deck. Now, Scylla's heart skipped a beat. It always did when something like this happened. They joined the rest of the crew that was leaving the weight room to report to their posts. A dozen or so pilots were among them, all forming up on John. She recognized Red, Skinny, and Ghost from her fighter wing. What's going on? Skinny asked her, shouting over the alarms. They knew not to ask John, at least not until they made it to the flight deck. Are the Graken back for another ass whoopin'? Scylla chose to ignore him as they hurried out of the weight room to the main corridor. Red was hopping along while trying to put on his flight suit, struggling to keep up. Do you take that with you everywhere? Skinny asked, chuckling to himself. Red wasn't fazed by their teasing. Gotta be prepared. Scylla noticed John had a lead on the rest of them now. If he was in a hurry, then she should have been, too. She took off, almost sprinting to catch up. The other pilots around her followed suit, sensing the urgency of the situation. They turned the corner at the end of the corridor. A crowd of pilots were bunched up outside the airlock doors. Scylla pushed her way forward to John. The hangar is open. John nodded. Medevac. From the surface, he ignored the commotion of the pilots, who were all trying to get a view into the flight deck from the view window in the airlock. He grabbed a crate that is next to the wall, plopped it into the middle of the corridor. He stepped up onto it. Listen up. The pilots didn't all stand at attention for their CAG like good little greys, but they did give him their eyes and ears. Captains ordered a lockdown on the surface. We've got a med hopper making a landing on the flight deck as we speak. All wings are to fly out immediately. Buzz, there should be spare flight suits in that locker next to you. They in there. Buzz opened a gray, double-wide locker, revealing a stacked pile of new black flight suits. Suit up and be ready, John shouted, catching one of the flight suits that Buzz tossed him. Once that light is green, get to your stations, get in your fighters, and prepare to launch. Scylla held her hand out for one and Buzz tossed one to her. The remainder were handed out to any other pilots who weren't already dressed for the occasion. Scylla looked over at Skinny. He was shaking. Get your nerves under control. Take a breath. I got it. I got it. Scylla looked up at the status indicator above the door. Still red. The hell is taking so long? Red blurted out. It's just one med hopper, right? What could be taking so long? Scylla resisted the urge to glance at her wireless. Jer would sometimes fill her in on what was happening on the bridge, but that was just getting her more in her own head. She closed her eyes, pictured herself going through the door, running across the deck, climbing the ladder to her fighter. Go. Her eyes opened. The light was green. The doors were wide enough for them to march out onto the flight deck 2 by 2. They were in unison, no one budging through or clawing their way to the front. They were a unit, both here and in the air. Scylla followed close behind Red until an angle to her fighter opened up, then sprinted across the flight deck. She eyed the med hopper on the far side of the flight deck. She avoided getting distracted by the spectacle. An engineer stood by her fighter, holding her helmet out for her. The sleek body of her fighter reflected the overhead lights, the battle scars and scrapes standing out like the lines of a fingerprint. She's ready for you, LT. Scylla snatched the helmet and secured it before climbing up into the cockpit. She checked controls, checked comms, primed ignition. The cockpit closed around her. Scylla, you're leading Wing 1, John said over the comm. I want Wings 2 and 3 to follow my lead. Scylla called to her fighters. Wing 1, approach. Her display showed all 21 fighters checked in and ready. Her fighter jerked as she was towed to her launch tube. The cockpit became dark as she entered the tube. Metal clanged as her fighter was hooked in. The airlock closed behind her. Launch. Scylla was the first out of her tube, the rest of her wing following close behind. A Messav Centurion was visible in the distance, and it didn't look like it was there to play nice. Is that what all this is for? Red asked. Scylla cut him off. Cut the chatter. We're not here to interpret orders. We're here to take 'em. Pay attention and be ready. Scylla organized her wing behind her like a mother hen. They were her pawns, and she had to keep them in line. For their own good. The commands came in from the bridge a moment later. Gerald had them moving into position to block the Messav Centurion's advance. Nice and steady to those cords, boys and girls, Scylla said. We don't want to spook anyone on the other side. No sudden moves. The Messav Centurion deployed its own fighter shortly thereafter. They mimicked the formation of Scylla's wing, a symmetrical opening. Skinny wasn't a fan. You can't be serious. These bastards want a dogfight. No one knows what they want, Scylla said. Well, maybe Gerald did, but that didn't matter now. Wings 2 and 3 joined them on their left flank, cutting off an obvious counter-attack from the Messav. For a while there was no chatter, no orders from the bridge, nothing but sitting in silence and staring across the battlefield. The Messav seemed to be doing the same. Scylla kept an eye on the tabla base on her display until she caught movement. A handful of Messav fighters pushed forward. The edges of the display screen turned red, and her husband's voice sounded over the comm, engage the enemy.
Okay. All in all, pretty good. For my tastes, anyway. I like to make these little notes as I go along. And I have notes like this for previous versions, previous snapshots of this chapter. But I can always come back, and if I want to remember, what was the name of those pilots in that chapter? I have a note for it so that I can easily find it. And Red, Skinny, and Ghost will not be forgotten. They will not be forgotten. Whooping. What was it? I thought there was something else that I missed. This one is questionable whether or not I should replace that. Yeah, I think, you know what? Okay, that's fine. We'll change that to green. That chapter's good. Now this one. Gambit.
The master tabla base looked like a mess to Gerald. Her plot lines crisscrossed, fighters interfering with each other's paths, breaking formation then coming back together. Their position had dissolved rapidly. Saren tacticians prided themselves on keeping order in battle, reducing random chance to as close to zero as possible. The chaos made Gerald cringe. Wing 2, get your pawns in order, he shouted into the comm. Engage the enemy on clean lines only. Don't take out the enemy if it's just going to put you in harm's way. We've lost 5 pawns so far, Commander Growl said. They've only lost 2. The projections don't look good. Gerald dismissed it. It's too early to tell. He looked at Wing 1, Scylla's wing, which was flying a clean formation. Scylla was responsible for the 2 kills they had so far, and her wing was working together to perfection. But if she was unsupported by the other fighter wings, Gerald knew that wouldn't last for long. Gerald tapped the image of the Intrepid on the master Tadla base. The Tadla base extrapolated new positions, looking for an advantage, a winning edge. Gerald changed the battlecruiser's course to the edge of the battlefield. The Tadla base ensured that the Intrepid began accelerating toward its destination smoothly. Graal's eyes widened. What are you doing, sir? Gerald knew Graal wasn't questioning him. He was trying to understand, to learn what Gerald was seeing. Dynamism. Commander, we have to keep the pieces moving. They're blocking us with our own pawns, using the dogfights in the middle to get their own position. We need a good angle if we want to get our nukes in play. Gerald watched as Wing 1 made 2 more kills. The other 2 wings each made a kill, but Wing 2 veered off course and was caught in the Supreme Verdict's batteries. Wing 2 lost another 3 pawns to the batteries alone. Gerald felt things slipping, but the Intrepid was almost in position, almost ready. The Tadla base offered alternatives, and Gerald replotted courses for all wings, giving them a window through which they could make an attack on the Messav battlecruiser. You're not trying to check them now, are you? Graal asked. This is a little soon to be doing that, sir. Not necessarily. I have a feeling about this. A feeling. Gerald put the finishing touches on the new position. Watch. Graal fell silent, and things started to fall into place. The Messav Centurion either didn't notice our advance or they don't perceive it as a threat. Gerald said they are focused on the battle in the middle. Graal's brow was still furrowed with concern. They outgun us 2-1, sir. Maybe, but in this close it won't matter. There was no contradiction by the commander, and when Gerald found the position he was looking for, he didn't hesitate. All guns, fire. Gerald saw the master Tadla base light up. He watched the window the computer had predicted open up, and the Messav vessel try in vain to evade the attack. He smiled with satisfaction as the enemy battlecruiser was bombarded by the full firepower of the Intrepid's batteries. The battle was as good as over. They are pulling back their pawns, Graal noted, eyeing the master Tadla base. They are putting all focus into maintaining their shields. They are dead in the water. That's what they are. Gerald's satisfaction, however, was short-lived. 2 new pieces appeared on the master Tadla base beside the Messav vessel, flanking it on either side. 2 additional Centurions now bolstered the defense of the first. Our fighter wings can't handle that, Graal said. We need to jump, or send a distress beacon. Why did they have to be on rotation over this fucking mining rock? There is no backup coming. No beacon will reach anyone in time. If you want to complain about how we don't have backup, then you can go down to the flight deck and hop in a fighter yourself. Gerald looked at the grim situation.
That's a little harsh. And this is the part of his character that I think wasn't working. This is the stuff that initially, when I wrote this, it seemed like it made sense. And maybe it did make sense for his character, but does not make him a likable character. It's stupid stuff like this. So there's no backup coming. No beacon will reach anyone in time. I don't know. Do I just want to delete it outright? I don't know. It's not the most harsh thing in the world. If you want to complain about how we don't have backup, then you can go down to the flight deck and hop in a fighter yourself. If you want to help me figure this out, then stop pointing out the obvious and start looking for a solution. I don't know. It's not bad. He's dealing with Graal too, and they're they butt heads with each other. I don't know. I'm going to leave a comment just so I come back and look at this. But
there is no backup coming. No beacon will reach anyone in time. If you want to complain about how we don't have backup, then you can go down to the flight deck and hop in a fighter yourself. Gerald looked at the grim situation before them. But if you want to help me figure this out, then stop pointing out the obvious and start looking for a solution. Gerald took a moment to absorb what he saw on the master Tadla base, and a moment was all he had. The Messav battlecruisers were launching their own fighters, and the combined force of them would overrun the Intrepid if he didn't do something soon. He knew that the odds were slim, but slimmer odds had turned out in his favor before.
The newly arrived. These are the. I clarified this. The new arrivals.
The new arrivals were launching their own fighters, and the combined force of them would overrun the Intrepid if he didn't do something soon. He knew that the odds were slim, but slimmer odds had turned out in his favor before. Launch decoy nukes at Supreme Verdict. We need spearheads and spheres on those new arrivals. Keep them distracted until we can make our adjustments. Empty every launched.
See, it's things like this. This is why I play it back, because I go and I edit this, and then lo and behold, I already. Oh, we'll have to. So we need spearheads and spheres on those. We'll just say centurions. Oops.
Launch decoy nukes at Supreme Verdict. We need spearheads and spheres on those centurions. Keep them distracted until we can make our adjustments. Empty every launch tube. A little aggressive, don't you think? Growl asked. They'll see through those decoys once they get hit with them. Fake nukes are just as good as real ones right now. Aiden, trust me. Growl looked Gerald in the eye. Off. Be with us. The Tadla base called Gerald back, trying to show him something. And there he saw it. The solution that he'd wanted to find. There was only one wing in position to make it work, though, and that was Silas. Gerald hesitated. The Tabla base blinked at him. He couldn't send her to do that. Anything but that. It was suicide. He found Scylla's fighter on the Tabla base and touched it, opening a direct channel to her. Scylla, love, it's me. This is what I need you to do.
I like that better. Overall, not too bad. This seems, it's showing more strength than it is being an asshole, I guess. I think that one's fine. And here it is. For those who haven't read, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler. You've been warned.
Have you lost your mind, Chair? Scylla, this is all we've got right now. Scylla looked at the path Gerald had plotted for her wing. It was perilous, taking them right by the Centurion's batteries. But if it were, well, Scylla just hoped she'd be there to see it. By the sound of Gerald's voice when he'd given her the orders, he'd known it, too. This was another one of his gambits. I love you, Scylla. Just cover my ass so I can bring it back home for you. Scylla punched in the flight path, sharing it with the other pilots in her wing. I love you too, Captain. There was no time to waste. To Scylla's surprise, the pilots of her wing didn't balk at the flight path as it appeared on their screens. Most of them were veterans, too. They knew these moments came without any warning, and the only answer they could give was complete agreement. Scylla led Wing 1 toward the leftmost Centurion. They were cutting through the center of the battlefield, but it was the only way, the fastest way. The hole they left as they vacated space was filled by the spheres Intrepid had launched, spinning and firing at any of the Messab fighters that tried to cut them off from behind. In the distance, Scylla saw the badly damaged Supreme Verdict jump out of furled in space. The decoy nukes had been enough to scare them off. Tarek would live to fight another day, but if Scylla could pull this mission off, he would have to answer for attacking another member of the conglomerate. She reminded herself of that as she led her pawns into the fray. Humans weren't supposed to fight humans. They were supposed to fight the Grakhan. But this was an exception. A wing of enemy fighters came straight for them. They're going to play chicken with us, Scylla told her pawns. Hold steady and stay on course. She only hoped that wasn't what the Messab wing leader had instructed their pilots to do, or else it wouldn't end well. Spearheads from Intrepid sped past them, colliding head-on with several of the Messab fighters, some slipping through and diving at the Centurions in the background. But the Messab fighter wing was undeterred. Scylla's wing showed discipline on their approach, firing round after round at the enemy. The Messab fighters took hits, and one of them went down. Scylla maintained fire, keeping steady. At the last moment, the Messab wing leader pulled up and his entire wing followed. Scylla's pawns ripped holes in their hulls as they were exposed to their weapons' fire. Any surviving enemy fighters were torn apart by the spearheads and spheres there to mop up the mess. Scylla pressed her pawns on past the center of the battlefield toward their true goal. Watch the batteries, she warned as they approached the berth of the Centurion. We can't avoid them, but we can outmaneuver them. Spread out and give each other space to breathe. Scylla's hands tensed on the touch controls. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. The gun batteries on the Messav vessel would wait to fire until they were in range. It was that first shot that was most dangerous, and that was what Scylla was anticipating. If she didn't react quickly enough, she was screwed. The only warning was the yellow flash that preceded the bullet spray. The batteries fired. Scylla pulled up just in time, and her pilots maneuvered with her. A second battery joined in and things became more complicated. The batteries tracked their course, flying along the starboard side of the Centurion. Spearheads demolished several of them, but once they were out of range of the first battery, they were within the range of the second. Two pilots weren't fast enough, and they were ripped to shreds. Scylla tilted right, spun left, braked, nosedived. Every maneuver seemed impossible, but she and her remaining pawns made it happen. Finally, the moment came. They had made it to the side docks, where the Messav fighters launched from. She pulled hard to the left, veering into their open docks. The space spanned the width of the battlecruiser and was open on the other end. Scylla and her pilots braked, slowing down in hopes that they would stop before they flew out the other side. They are closing the port doors, Red shouted. The jaws of the dock doors were slowly closing. The Messav were betting they couldn't stop in time, that they'd crash into the doors. Scylla dipped her nose and her fighter scraped the floor of the dock, sparks flying everywhere. She turned her fighter, sliding sideways toward the port side of the Centurion's dock. One of the other fighters passed her, unable to stop. Red, you're not gonna make it. Brake now. Red rushed towards the closing doors, out of control. They snapped shut and his fighter exploded in a fireball. Have mercy. Scylla's fighter finally skidded to a stop, and she popped open the hatch above her head and climbed out. What remained of Wing 1 was with her inside the Centurion's dock. So were the Messav. The Messav technicians were still at their posts. Scylla drew her pistol and fired, knowing she had to beat them to it. The technicians were poorly armed, and the pilots in Scylla's squad took them out quickly. At the edge of the dock was a set of stairs leading to an airlock. The artificial gravity on the vessel, which mimicked Messav's own gravitation, made everything more difficult and taxing on her body. Still, she ran for the airlock doors and was the first of her comrades to reach them. Stay back, she shouted to her pilots. She planted a small detonator at the center of the airlock doors and backed away. The doors exploded open, and air erupted from the ship with the strength of a gale. Scylla led her troops through the airlock, making a beeline for the engineering bay. Messav security officers had responded to the distress signals and were pouring in from every other entrance. Scylla and the remaining 10 pilots of her squad held up behind makeshift cover, hiding behind desks, computer terminals, anything that they could, but it wouldn't last for long. For every shot they fired at the Messav security, they were returned threefold. Skinny panicked. We're screwed. We're gonna die. Scylla grabbed Skinny by the helmet and shook him. Bitch later. That airlock is sucking all the oxygen out of this room and you'll still be able to breathe. Just hold out for one more fucking minute. Their cover was starting to break apart. One pilot was wounded by a stray shot, another by friendly fire as the first clenched his gun. Scylla threw a grenade over her shoulder and the detonation caused a break in the suppressive fire. The air had to be nearly gone at the rate it was being sucked out of the airlock. Scylla stepped out of cover and found a handful of Messav security officers wounded by the grenade, the rest struggling to breathe, trying to get out of the room. Are you in the engineering bay yet? Gerald asked her over the comm. We're close. She advanced further into the ship, turned the corner, found it. Good. Now find that damn computer. Scylla spotted it in the corner, a tall terminal that, with the right codes, controlled every aspect of the Centurion's operations. Scylla stepped up to it and inserted a datastic that would compromise the entire system. Within seconds, the display was up and the battlecruiser was at her beck and call. It was like a crude, unintelligent database, but she'd been trained on it in tactical school. She shut down life support systems to every part of the ship, disabled the escape pods, and terminated all comm communications between the ship and its fighters. She even took a moment to download a copy of the ship's directive, which would prove damning for the Messav at their tribunal. But most importantly, Scylla fired every gun, every bomb and nuke the Centurion had at its own allied vessel. Something must have worked because Gerald was suddenly shouting in her ear the next moment. You did it, Scylla, you did it. Now get back here, get back to the dock. Scylla called to her pilots. Relief washed over their faces and they raced out of the airlock. Scylla followed, but before she could step through, there was a crash behind her and the doors to the engineering bay were forced open. MESAB security officers, now equipped with breathing apparatus, chased after her. Scylla fired at them to press them back and stumbled backward out of the airlock. A bullet struck her leg and forced her to her knees. She rolled out of the way of the airlock to escape, but that was all she could manage. She saw the pilots of her wing getting into their fighters and starting to take off. The security officers were closing in on her. Jer, can you hear me? What is it, Scylla? Get out of there. Why are you still on the ship? Gerald, She saw a MESAV officer standing over her, his pistol in her face. He pulled the trigger.
And that's the boarding sequence I was talking about. So this is a part that I am going to tweak because I have changed the dynamic of their relationship. They are husband and wife, but it plays off better given it's better when there's more tension. There's too much lovey-dovey stuff. We'll go. Delete that. Yeah, we'll just go with that. Off. Could pull this off. Could pull this off. If Scylla could pull this off. I think I'll adjust this. It's been enough to make them run. Because pause into the battle. Center. Into the center of the battle. Into the center of the battle. Into the midst. Yeah. This sentence was weird. Sometimes you write a sentence and you're like, what was I thinking? This makes no sense. I don't understand what I was trying to say. I wish I did. Well, okay, I do understand what I was trying to say, but gosh, this could have been worded so much better than this. She only hold steady and stay on course. She only hoped that wasn't what the Masav wing leader had instructed their pilots to do, or else it wouldn't end well. So they're playing chicken, right? They're going to play chicken with us, right? All she could hope for was that her pilots had steadier hands than the Messov. What? Otherwise, it wouldn't end well. There we go. Why did I start using that term instead? So this is the entire book. So battle spheres are these things that I came up with. They're these ships that disrupt everything in the midst of battle. Hence, battle sphere. Okay, it's a word that I completely and totally ripped um, from a Magic the Gathering card. For those who know, mere battle sphere. I liked the word, so I repurposed it. Okay. This doesn't make sense. Why is that even in there? Okay. And this is a chapter here that needs a bit of work. It's a short chapter.
Scylla. Gerald smashed his fists on the command table. The plan had worked. Somehow, Scylla had pulled it off. There was only one remaining Centurion, and it was suffering unrecoverable system failures. The Messav fighters were retreating, and the Intrepid's pawns, spheres, and spearheads were cleaning them up. All of the fighters that had successfully entered the enemy battlecruiser had managed to get out, except for one. Captain, I'm sorry, Commander Growl said. No, she's not dead. You son of a bitch. He started plotting a new course for Wing 1, sending them back to the battlecruiser to get Scylla, but the Tabla base refused to comply. Gerald, she's gone. The remaining Messav battlecruiser took the opportunity to jump away before the battle could continue. Gerald felt the room start to spin. He grabbed onto the edge of the command table to keep himself from falling. He'd won the battle, but his wife was dead. Commander Growl walked over to him and took him by the arm. Sir, you have to maintain your composure while on deck. But Gerald wasn't listening to him. He just stared at the Tabla base, hoping Scylla would reappear. Even as the last of the fighters returned to the Intrepid, he stared at the empty black, willing her to come back to him.
Hmm. No. Made. So part of this also is that this isn't entirely clear. So the centurion that survives is the one that she was on. Um, so yep. So that clears that comment. So obviously their marriage is not in a good spot at this point in the story. Really not in a good spot. But it doesn't make it less painful. It doesn't make it less painful when this happens. That's for sure. Even as the last of the fighters returned to the Intrepid, he stared at the empty black, willing her to come back to him. I think we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
The day of Scylla's memorial was the first day that Gerald left his quarters. Commander Growl had taken over in his absence, overseeing the final operations on Furladen. Gerald dressed in his best grays, meticulously fastening each medal and insignia. He arrived at the chapel of the soldier before anyone else, even the priest. He sat in silence, in solitude, for almost an hour before Abby arrived. "I'm sorry, Gerald," she said. It was the first time he'd seen her since he sent her to Furladen. She sat down beside him. "Why the hell are you here?"
Yeah, and this is it. This is it again. This what? Oh no! Yeah, this really can't happen. I can't let this happen. This is too much. This is too far. This is no bueno. Oi. There's very little here. Okay. Yeah, this is emergency. Emergency. This lovely warning icon that you can't see. Let me scroll. This lovely warning icon that I add here. This means that there's a significant amount of work. There's a significant amount of work that needs to happen with this chapter. And I cannot do that right now. So, did Did I make any adjustments to this one? I think I did. Okay. So this chapter actually should be next, but all right. I think we're going to have to wrap things up here so I can get to bed. But next time on the editing stream, we'll pick up where we left off. Some similar stuff to this, I think. We'll maybe do some line editing. Yeah, you can tell when there's two yawns close together like that. That's when you know you're really tired. But I should also be able to share some of this soon. Jotnar. It's going to be finished up tomorrow. I literally have maybe a few hundred words left to write. Sometimes what I'll even do when I've reached the end of a first draft is I'll actually leave the last few hundred words and just not write it in the first draft, and then come back and write it after I've read through it once instead. And that's sometimes interesting. So I might try that, because you have the perspective of looking back and seeing the whole story, and then there's things you forget, man. There's things you forget. You're in the middle of writing, and writing is not like reading. Writing is not like reading at all. You will read a book and you will remember what happened, and it all hopefully should make sense. Writing, that process happens over a longer period of time. It's stretched out, because generally speaking, you can't write as fast as you can read, and writing is a much more intense practice than reading is. And so when you're writing, it requires a lot of when you're writing, it requires a lot of effort, and reading is like the opposite. So you're really in two different headspaces. So when you're writing, you're going through that process and being creative. And so sometimes you need to come back later and then read through it for everything to click. But yeah. So almost a 2-hour stream. That ain't bad. That ain't bad at all. Alrighty. We will wrap it up there for today, folks. Thank you for watching this replay, probably. If you watch it. I'll probably make some clips of this. Of the fun parts. Toodaloo.